When I ask UX people who practice user research what is their biggest challenge, I usually hear how hard it is to engage stakeholders with research. What are your thoughts on this topic?
I definitely agree that it is one of the biggest challenges. In those cases, I do need to try to demonstrate the value of user research and the return on investment. However, it's funny because I have a slightly different problem, more of a fortunate problem, if you will. I actually am in an organization that has user research pretty well established, or at least usability. And so in my cases, one of my biggest challenges is actually stakeholders who feel some sort of entitlement coming to me, feel as though they know what the research is all about, they know what they're doing, and they expect a usability test on this day when in fact maybe a usability test isn't the right research method. In those cases, it just takes a little negotiation to step back, think about the goals, and try to figure out the best way to approach what they're trying to get at.
What would you recommend to in-house UX researchers who are always trying to identify opportunities for impactful research if they want to better identify such opportunities?
I would recommend, first of all, just having an understanding of what research is out there now. So what present research is going on, what past research has been going on, either by you, your team, or any other part of your organization. So for instance, even market research or analytics, if those are other groups in your organization. And it's really making those connections, developing relationships, and understanding what's been done. And then taking a look at that research and triangulating, understanding what the gaps are in knowledge, what you need to understand more about. So I think that's a good start. I would say then developing your own processes and methodologies for gathering recurring metrics, so baseline research and benchmark against it later. So I think that's really a good way to get started on that.
UX researchers sometimes experience a tension between conducting research they were asked to do by their stakeholders, for example, product managers, versus research that they were not asked to do but think they should do. What are your thoughts on balancing this tension?
I struggle with this one a lot, and I'm always learning from it and refining the balance that I have. I think it's definitely a negotiation. So again, it's about building those relationships and establishing a rapport with people. And then once you've done that, you have a better situation to compromise, talk about what needs to be done. I never say no to stakeholders about what they want to do. I just think that's not a good idea unless it's completely crazy, but I think you always want to work with them and be respectful of their needs, and then try to propose to them how you can work in, integrate some of the research that you think should be done, even if it's kind of in a guerrilla, fast, cheap way. So within a project, that's how I would approach it, but sometimes outside of projects altogether, my team will come up with more strategic research that we want to run. We take the initiative to actually think about what research we can be doing, but we always try to tie that back to a project. So we'll approach a project team or a program and say, this research might be really helpful for you, and that way, by tying it back, you are making a tangible impact on something, but you also have some budget to build back to as well for it.
Can you tell me a story about a difficult stakeholder who did not understand or respect UX research?
Yeah, that happens from time to time.
No names?
No names here. I think that one story that comes to mind was a case where someone maybe just didn't understand it. They respected the process, but they didn't fully understand usability testing in this case. And we had run a usability test, and this person was part of the very initial goal setting situation, but she was unable to make other meetings moving forward, so the planning meetings and the actual, or watch any of the actual testing. So when it came time to give the results, the product didn't fare very well, and she was all up in arms, very upset about it. She felt, I think, that it was going to be her reputation on the line type of thing. And she said, well, you didn't introduce the product that well to them, you didn't show them all the things that it can do first, and kind of that conception or preconception that you basically have to lead the participant through or give them all this information that they probably don't need to have or shouldn't have in that situation. And so she said, don't do that again, and it was a very contentious situation. So in that case, it was a little too late to explain to her the point of usability testing and why you do what you do. And I thought back to it, and it was a good learning experience for me because I thought about those initial meetings, and she really was in that goals meeting, but the planning meetings she couldn't make. So it made me start to think about how you engage those key stakeholders. So you might want to go out to some of these key stakeholders on their own, especially if they can't make those meetings, and really loop them into what you're doing and get their buy-in and say, you know, how does this work for you? And if those kinds of questions come up about your methodology, that's your opportunity to explain to them why you do what you do and what the method's all about.
What did you do with that person eventually?
Well, in that case, it was actually, it was a Friday before I went on vacation. So I was like, well, I'm going on vacation right now. But when I came back, I spoke with her offline because that was in a situation with about 20 people. But I spoke with her on her own, and we tried to work out ways to communicate the results in a way that would explain sort of the methodology and what our goals were and what we were going into it with. So.
Cool. Many UX practitioners are always looking for creative deliverables that engage their stakeholders with research findings. What are some deliverables you found to be working well for you?
Well, I can't say that I know of types of creative deliverables and that I give an interpretive dance when I'm presenting my results or anything like that. But when I do present in a regular PowerPoint type way, there are some little tricks that I've learned to use in some situations. And first, the key one is video if you have the time. I know we always don't have the time, but video clips, even a video montage at the very beginning of the presentation demonstrating an executive summary, if you will, of kind of all different types of things that you saw, good and bad. I think that always helps because people are really engaged by seeing the users themselves and hearing things from their mouths and not mine. So that's always good, or just sprinkling video clips where possible. In the absence of that, I actually have heard an idea. I haven't used this, but I recently heard an idea about taking little screenshots of people's faces and integrating them with your findings on your PowerPoint or your report. And in those cases, it's interesting, just at the moment where that user experienced that little problem, you can see exactly what their facial emotions were. So I thought that's interesting. And then also, if it's more qualitative research, I love to tell a story with quotes. I think that's really useful and people respond really well to it. Especially when you have different themes coming together and you sort of tell a story with those themes and then you just list a bunch of quotes to support those themes. I think that's gone very well, and for the same reason, because it's coming from a user's mouth and not my own.
Some UX research practitioners believe that they should only provide findings and never offer recommendations following UX studies. They let their teams figure out what needs to be done by themselves, believing that this way these teams are more committed to act upon research. What are your thoughts on this approach?
I think I'm against that approach.
Okay.
The only case I'm not against that approach is if I've decided with the team ahead of time to have some kind of workshop, half day or a full day, where you're getting together and the explicit the intention there is to go through all the results and come up with good actionable results with me as the researcher in the room with them. Otherwise, I wouldn't go recommendation lists, if that's a word, because you just never know where they're going to take it. They may have misinterpreted a finding in the first place and are solving the wrong problem, or they may just kind of put on Band-Aids and things that you want to be sort of involved with or give them some kind of parameters around. So what I usually do is provide recommendations, but that in itself is a tricky business because if you're too vague with your recommendation, if you say, make this shopping cart more usable, that's like not having a recommendation. It's not useful at all for people. If you are very specific, too specific, it can come across as you're telling people what to do, or not giving them sort of the freedom to work within their own constraints and their own creativity. So I like to go somewhere in between and provide a fairly specific recommendation, but give them considerations or examples. For instance, if no one understood how to remove an item in your shopping cart, you can say, consider making it more clear by adding either an icon or a link or a checkbox or some other way to actually remove an item rather than this box at the top somewhere, and then let them decide with your guidance.
How can UX practitioners tell if their stakeholders are bought into research?
It's funny, I think about this sometimes, and I think you can most easily tell when it's too late. So it's when they've not come to your research, they've not come to your debrief. That's when you kind of know they're checked out, they're not really interested. But it is too late at that point. So I think in the early stages of planning, I, again, sort of pull out those key stakeholders and go to them and say, what do you think about this? How do you think this approach will work? Is there anything else you want to include in this? And really picking people one by one in addition to those group meetings. And then that's the opportunity for people to feel like they're really being consulted and they're getting engaged and really part of it and have that ownership over the research.
That's all I had for you.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about this topic?
I think it's a great topic and very important, and I'm glad you're writing a book on it.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.